So, as we mentioned just a minute ago, bosses should be paid by the government to hire ex-offenders.
Yes, the centre-right think tank Policy Exchange says the move could save us millions of pounds a year. Well, here to explain why is the report's author, Ben Ullman. Also with us is Junior Smart, who spent 10 years in jail. Morning to you both.
Morning.
Ben, just explain to us why ex-offenders need this kind of help to get jobs.
Well, the majority of offenders who come out of prison will actually not have a job lined up, and they're twice as likely to go on to re-offend. So it's really important that as many as possible can get into a job. It means that they have income, that they can support themselves. It means they lead a much more stable lifestyle, because if they don't have a job, they're going to go on to re-offend. So it's really important that the government puts a lot of time and effort into trying to get as many offenders back into a job as possible.
Junior, your last sentence finished in 2006. What happened to you when you came out?
Well, I experienced firsthand, you know, how disheartening it could be to come out, and as much as I wanted to turn my life around, it just seemed like I was finding it really, really difficult to engage in employment. Fortunately for me, I found St Giles Trust, and I'm now in a fortunate position to help other young offenders who are involved in perhaps gang crime, gun crime, into employment and into education.
But you told people
training.
that you had a criminal record when you applied, did you?
Yeah, it's the way it has to be. I was being completely above board, and I was being quite straight with the employers. I think it's really important to. It's sad that a lot of people don't realise that prison can change people, and young people need to be afforded a chance to
Right.
gain employment and give back to society.
Ben, do you think that actually by giving employers money from the government to hire people like junior ex-offenders, will that actually, how will that actually make any difference?
Well, what we're actually suggesting is, rather than pay the employer, because the problem is if you pay the employer, they will then take offenders purely to get the money. So you don't pay the employer. What you pay is third-party providers, such as charities, public sector or private sector. They use that money to train the offender, to give them the skills, the education, perhaps housing, the healthcare, and maybe even a suit to go to interview, to then place that offender in employment. So you're incentivising these third-party companies, much like welfare.
So it's not as if the companies would get a bonus for taking on somebody. You're talking about giving charities, providing money for people to apply for jobs. Is that what you're saying?
Right, exactly. Because if you pay the employer, then they're not taking offenders on an equal basis. You have to have a fair recruitment process, and obviously you want offenders to be trained correctly to then be placed in employment.
I imagine some people that's sitting at home, Junior, will think, well, how is that fair that somebody who's come out of jail for something they presumably have done wrong gets a little bit extra help, gets an extra suit, gets an extra somebody to train them, rather than somebody else? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. There's 2 points to it. Firstly, the cost of re-offending is staggering. You know, we will just keep on building prisons, and I think it costs something like £169,000 to keep each offender locked up. And I mean, if so many people are re-offending, we need to look at alternatives. Secondly, young people deserve a second chance. If a person's determined to turn their life around, we need to offer them opportunities.
How much money are we talking about here, Ben?
Well, potential savings that we've used models from the US, we think that could save the taxpayer around £300 million.
That's how much you could save, but how much are you talking about putting in?
Well, I mean, we don't know because the companies don't exist yet. But say, for example, in the US, you might have a system where the government pays $5,000 to place an offender in a job. Your saving is whatever it costs to be in prison, $30,000 a year, plus court costs, plus police time, which you're saving. So actually the investment is a lot smaller, and you only actually pay once the offender is actually in employment.
OK, very interesting to talk about the money, also to talk about attitudes as well, because presumably one of the problems you were coming up against was the fact that, you know, you have a criminal record. Employers don't necessarily want to employ somebody with a criminal record, so how do you change that?
Well, basically, I think we need to address it at a ground roots level. Let's not forget that ex-offenders do make terrific workers, and that they have got a lot to contribute back into society. It's not like we're talking about a non-skilled, and with the right training, young people can move forward. You know, with my clients, once they're in education, in training, in employment, I've seen them make terrific turnarounds. And I think that's really important.
Yeah.
OK, Junior Smart, Ben Ullman, interesting talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at this morning.